Yes, friends. Now let us go to the next part of this base topic, which we are going to call it as levy of GST, where we are going to discuss the first P. My friends, we have already discussed that there are totally 6 P's for levy of GST. What are they? You are talking about product, you are talking about process, and you are talking about place. Product happens to be goods or services. Process happens to be supply. And when you're talking about place, you're talking about interstate or intrastate supply. Right. So we are targeting now our first P, where you're going to discuss about product. What is a product for GST? Goods and services. Obviously, after the first 3 P's are satisfied, then we'll be discussing about price, percentage, and you're going to talk about person. Now you have to understand that these first 3 P's are there covered in this chapter, where we are going to call it as levy of GST. The next 3 P's are covered in 3 separate chapters subsequently. Price is covered in the next chapter, where we are going to call it as valuation. Percentage is covered in the next thereafter, a chapter after valuation, which we are going to call it as classification. And person is covered the chapter which is coming after classification, which we are going to call it as RCM. So the last 3 P's, price, percentage, and person, will be discussed separately in 3 separate topics, coming subsequently line after line after levy of GST, valuation, classification, and RCM. So the focus now in this chapter is only from the first 3 P's, which is there in the chapter levy of GST, where you are going to discuss about goods and services, product, then supply, process, then interstate or intrastate supply, which is place. Now let us again focus on our first P, which we are going to call it as product. The first P happens to be product, goods or services. Right. Now when you talk about goods or services, definitions, as we have already discussed, will always be given under green shade. Right. So for ease of understanding, you will have color coding, which I have already discussed very clearly in the introductory topic. So it will always be given in green shade. So when you're talking about the definition of goods and services, the definitions are always given under section 2. Section 2 clause 52 talks about goods. Section 2 clause 102 talks about services. Right. At the cost of repetition, I am repeating again, my friends. We are going to discuss provisions only of CGST Act unless mentioned otherwise. So I need not tell that this is section 2 clause 52 of CGST Act 2017, this is section 2 clause 102 of CGST Act 2017. It is implied that we are discussing the provisions, whether it is section or rule number. We are going to discuss only about CGST Act 2017 unless mentioned otherwise. If at all I am talking about some section of IGST Act 2017, I will be very clear that it is a section of IGST Act 2017. Now coming back to the definition of goods and services. So we have to understand, friends, both are defined under section 2, one under section 2 clause 52, other under section 2 clause 102, and we are going to see both simultaneously, and the presentation is also given in that fashion. So you have to compare what is goods and what is services and then try to correlate. Now first let us talk about goods. I'll ask you a very simple question, friends. The moment I tell goods, what is the normal thing that comes to your mind? The moment I tell goods, what is the normal thing that first occurs in your mind? Right. It should be movable. It should be movable. The moment I tell goods, it is very clear that it should be movable. So goods always focuses on a very important property of it being movability. So any item, if it is movable, only then it can be called as goods. So whenever we are talking about goods, we are talking about goods means. See, goods is divided into 3 parts. Means, excludes, includes. Likewise, services is also categorized into 3 parts. Means, excludes, and includes. So goods means every kind of movable property. Every kind of movable property. Now, my friends, at this point, we have to remember that the focus is only on movable property. It has got nothing to do with tangibility. Tangibility is not the criteria for an item to be goods. When I asked you what is the first thing that comes to your mind when we talk about goods, few of you, my friends, would have thought of tangibility. Okay, I can touch it, then it is goods. No, tangibility does not defines goods. Let me take an example. So, for example, you're talking about chemicals, gaseous chemicals. You're talking about gaseous chemicals. So, the moment you're talking about gaseous chemicals, they may not be tangible. I'm not talking about the packing material, the cylinder in which these items will be there. These items per se may not be tangible, but still the fact remains that they are goods because they are movable. Goods is only determined by its movable characteristics. It is not determined by its tangible property. It is only determined by its movable property. So it should be movable. For an item to be called as goods, it should be movable. Tangibility is not the criteria for an item to be called as goods. It is only movability. Now, before going to the other aspects of goods where we are going to discuss about what goods does not includes and what goods includes, let us only stick to means part. Let us only and only stick to means part. We'll take services. Services under section 2 clause 102 is defined as services means anything other than goods. Anything other than goods. It's quite simple. So services, they have made the scope very wide. Whatever is not goods, it is covered by services. But very important point, the wordings are anything. Right. Now you may wonder that anything includes everything. No, it's anything. Right. Anything. For example, you're talking about say immovable property. There was a big discussion and deliberations on this immovable property. Right. When you talk about say immovable property, whether immovable property can be said to be services. Obviously, there are two views till now. I'm not jumping into the conclusion. I'm just trying to tell that the wordings used in the definition of services is anything other than goods. That thing does not cover immovable property. Right. So you cannot jump to a conclusion that okay, whatever is not goods is services. That is a very wrong way to read it. And for those who loves interpretation and for those who actually understand the way to learn law, they will not be jumping to conclusions per se. You should never jump to conclusions. You have to understand the aspect, and that is the beauty of law. Right, friends, I have seen people by-hearting the subject like taxation. I wonder what are they going to do after they clear the exams. I doubt that they may not be in a position to learn then. The reason being, this is the best time to read it. Only when you're a student, you have that passion to learn. You have that urge to learn because your exams is demanding you to sit and learn. Once you are qualified, I'm not telling that by hearting you cannot qualify. No, I don't want to again make conclusions. I'm not here to make conclusions, my friends. I'll never make such conclusions. And I have seen results. There are many people who have just by-hearted or mugged up the provisions of the law and they have qualified, and at times they have got excellent marks. But my sympathy to them, because once they are qualified, either they will be into practice, sympathy to them and their clients, or they are going to do for the job. Again, sympathy to their company where they are going to be recruited. The problem is after you are qualified, you don't have that patience to sit and learn. Unless you are passionate towards learning and you have the time to learn. Passion is one thing and having time is other thing. It will be very difficult for you to sit and learn. So I will rather suggest that this is the best time to sit and learn with concepts. Right, we'll be again focusing on concepts, and that is the reason I'm telling that don't jump to conclusions and make sure that we are going to discuss everything, rather possibly more than what is required for exams. And now and then I'll be taking few extra points like the point I said about immovable property to make you understand or to make you keen towards learning the law. Right, not per se GST Act. That is an art of learning the law. You have to understand how to learn the law, how to interpret the law, and more importantly, how not to jump to conclusions. Right, again coming back to the definition of goods and services. Now, what was the definition of goods, my friends? Goods was very simple. Goods means every kind of movable property. Every kind of movable property. So the criteria that is important for an item to be goods is movable. Yes, it should be movable. And for services, it is anything other than goods. It is anything which is not goods. Right. Now coming back to the discussion, this is the general understanding of the meaning of goods and services. So normal meaning of goods and services we are done with. Right. So we are clear with the normal understanding of goods. Goods, one word, movable. Services, one word other than goods. Right. Now both goods and services excludes money and securities. It excludes money and securities. It is excluding that. Both goods and services will not include money and securities. To put in a very simple language, money and securities is neither goods nor services. Money and securities is neither goods nor services. Now we have to take an example for understanding money and securities. We'll be taking that example. We have that example in our discussion itself. Now as of now, just understand that goods is equal to movable minus money and securities. Services is equal to anything other than goods minus money and securities. So the means part and the excludes part of both goods and services we have discussed very clearly, comparing both goods and services side by side. Now goods includes actionable claim. We'll be discussing what is actionable claim. Growing crops, grass and things attached to land or forming part of the land which are agreed to be severed before sale or under the contract of sale. Before supply or under the contract of supply. Put it in simple words. You're talking about what? You're talking about including two things. Goods includes actionable claims and goods includes growing crops, grass, etc. etc. Right? Goods includes actionable claim and goods includes growing crops, grass, etc. etc. Understand that this growing crops, grass, things, etc. etc. is mentioned as a clarification. The second point is given as a mere clarification. Why? See, understand that grass, growing crops are coming out of land, and land being an immobile property, tomorrow no one should tell that grass is coming out of immobile property or growing crops are coming out of immobile property. Therefore, it is also immobile property, and if it is immobile property, then it is not goods. So one should not come with these fancy ideas and tell that no, grass is not goods, growing crops is not goods. So when you talk about inclusion, point number 2. Point number 1 is actionable claim, which we are going to discuss. Point number 2 is growing crops, grass, things, etc. etc. which are attached to land or forming part of land, which are agreed to be severed or cut down before supply or under the contract of supply. To put it in very simple terms, growing crops and grass, right? They are mentioned there in inclusion part of goods only as a clarification. They are merely a clarification. No, tomorrow no one should tell that they are not goods. That is the only reason that it is mentioned. So growing crops and grass, we have discussed what is the reason for inclusion. Now, inclusion of goods is clear. Now let us summarize goods. Goods is equal to, again mathematical formula, goods is equal to, you are talking about movable property minus money and securities plus actionable claim plus growing crops, grass, etc. etc. That is the definition of goods. Services, as of now we discussed, services is equal to, what was the first point? Anything other than goods minus money and securities plus. Now when you talk about this plus, it is talking about a very fancy word. If you see the sentence of the BAR Act, these are the exact wordings of the BAR Act that is mentioned: activities relating to use of money or its conversion from one form currency or denomination to another form currency or denomination for which a separate consideration is being charged. Now either you can read it in that way, right, or you can understand that it is talking about service charges. It is talking about service charges. Right, even inclusion of services has got two parts. First part in relation to money, second part in relation to securities. First point, you are talking about service charges in relation to use of money. In relation to use of money. And there is an explanation attached to the definition of service, which I have attached to the includes portion because they are trying to tell the same thing. That explanation tells that for the removal of doubts, it is hereby clarified that the expression services includes facilitating or arranging transaction in securities. To put in simple language, the second point in terms of explanation is talking about service charges in relation to transaction in securities. We'll tell no. Just now we have discussed some time back that money and securities is neither goods nor services, my friends, correct? What is the point was money and securities, they are not goods, they are not services. But we are not talking about money and securities, we are talking about service charges which are associated or which are connected or which are in relation to that money or securities. So we are talking about the service charges which are related to either usage of money or service charges which are related to either usage of securities. So we are not discussing about money and securities per se, we are discussing about service charges in relation to usage of money or service charges in relation to usage of securities. So you should not be confused with that aspect. Now if I were to tell in this in a simple way, right, we are talking about what? Now let us summarize both goods and services in a very simple fashion in mathematical formula. If I ask you, friends, what is goods, what should be answer? Your answer should be very clear as we are discussing, right? The moment I tell what is goods, what should come to your mind? Goods is equal to what? Movable, then minus money and securities, correct? So whenever we are discussing goods, what should be the definition that should run in your mind? Goods is equal to what? Movable property minus money and securities plus actionable claim plus growing crops or grass, etc., etc. That is the definition of goods, right? If I tell you what is services, services is equal to anything other than goods, minus money and securities plus you are talking about service charges in relation to usage of money plus service charges in relation to usage of securities. So that should be the way where you are going to read the definition of goods and services, correct? So that is the definition of goods and that is the definition of services, and we have also summarized it. But there are few terms which are yet to be discussed. Now before discussing that terms, let us take an example to understand what were we discussing, because just now we have discussed that goods is equal to mobile property minus money and securities plus growing crops, grass, and plus actionable claim. Goods. Services is equal to anything other than goods minus money and securities. But when it comes to plus talks about what? Service charges in relation to usage of money or plus service charges in relation to usage of securities. For that to understand, we have to take an example where you'll have more clarity what were we trying to understand. Now let us take the first example. Now when I talk about transaction in money, let us take an example where you want $100. My friend, you are in need of $100. You are planning to go somewhere outside and you are in need of $100. Right? Money changer receives 7,000 in exchange of $100, which means that when you went to money changer can be either bank or authorized dealer. In exchange of $100, you paid 7,000 rupees. Whereas the current RBI rate, selling rate was 68 rupees. So RBI rate was 68 rupees per dollar, which in simple language means that you should have paid, actually the worth of that $100 was $100 into rupees 68 per dollar, which is equal to 6,800. $100 was equal to rupees 68 per dollar multiplied by $100, which is equal to 6,800. But how much you have paid? You have not paid 6,800. You have paid 7,000. You have actually paid 7,000. Now, how to break that 7,000? Break into two parts. The first part, you are going to talk about 6,800, where that was the real price of it. And the second part, you are going to talk about 200 rupees, where you have given something extra, where you have paid something extra. So the actual worth of that should have been, of $100 should have been 6,800. Obviously, the money changer will have its own margin. He is not going to do business without any profit. His margin or his profit or his spread, you may call it as technically as spread, is 200 rupees. Now this 6,800 is mere transaction in money, and this mere transaction in money is neither goods nor services. So it is neither goods nor services. Therefore, there is no levy of GST. Therefore, my friends, there is no levy of GST on 6,800. What we have done, see, you went to a money changer and you wanted $100. And you knew that the RBI rate is 68 rupees per dollar, which means that you should have technically paid 6,800, but you ended up paying 7,000 rupees. Why? The money changer is having a small margin. So what you do, you now split up 7,000, the payment that you have made, into two parts. 6,800, which was only change of money. You paid in rupees and you got dollars. That is mere transaction in money. Rather, money also includes foreign currency, my friends. We are going to see the definition. So don't forget that. So when you give 6,800 rupees and you get dollars in return, that is mere transaction money. But that person has not taken 6,800, he has taken something extra, he has taken 7,000. That excess 200 rupees is nothing but service charges in relation to usage of money. It is nothing but service charges in relation to usage of money, which in technical language the money changers are calling it as spread, right? That is supply of services, isn't it? That actually is covered by the definition of services. What was services? Services is equal to anything other than goods minus money and securities plus service charges in relation to usage of money or service charges in relation to usage of securities. This is service charges in relation to usage of money. Therefore, it is services and GST will be very much applicable on it. So that is levy of GST. That is the first part, right? There we are talking about transaction in money. Let us take another example where the focus shifts to securities. The focus shifts to securities. Now assume that you have done your financial management classes and the faculty has taken so good that now you are interested in investing in mutual funds, right? And you heard the advertisement, mutual funds are subject to market risk. Please read the documents carefully before investing. You have done that. What you have done, you have read what was written on the outlet. You have never seen inside the documents. Nevertheless, you want to invest in mutual funds, correct? Now, when you talk about mutual funds, you have something called as net asset value. The market value of mutual funds, you technically call it as net asset value. You want 100 mutual fund units. You are in need of 100 mutual fund units and the net asset value of mutual fund is 68 rupees per unit, which means that if you want to get 1 unit of mutual fund, you have to pay 68 rupees. But how many units do you require? You require 100 units. Therefore, you end up paying how much? You will be paying 6,800 strictly, correct? Because you require 100 units and the market price for unit is 68, you should have paid 6,800. But that did not happen. How much you have paid? You have again paid 7,000. I have taken the same numbers for the purpose of simplicity. You again ended up paying 7,000. Now I will tell that why we have to pay extra. If you recall your mutual fund chapters correctly, you have something called as entry load. Whenever you are entering inside mutual fund unit, you have to pay something called as entry load. Don't go with the numbers that I have taken. The numbers that I have taken is only for understanding purposes. They are hypothetical. So don't judge based on the numbers. We are only here to understand the concept here, right? So I have taken the same numbers basically. Now 7,000 you are paid, but actually you should have paid only how much? You should have paid only 6,800. Why? One mutual fund unit was 68 rupees. And if you require 100 mutual fund units, it is nothing but 6,800. So the market value of the mutual funds that you are investing, it is nothing but transaction in securities. And transaction in securities is neither goods nor services. There is no levy of GST. There is absolutely no levy of GST. But wait, how much you paid? You ended up paying 7,000. 6,800 is mere transaction securities, which is neither goods nor services. Therefore, there is no GST, no levy. Forget about collection. There is no levy. We'll be discussing the difference between levy and collection in some time, right? There is no levy. Levy is the triggering point. Collection is the later point of time. Collection is for administrative convenience. Levy is the point where you decide whether you are covered by the taxation law or not. Correct? Now that extra 200 rupees that you have paid is nothing but the service charges in relation to usage of securities or in relation to securities. Technically, you call that in mutual fund language as entry load. On that entry load, whether there will be GST, my friends? Yes, because services includes what? Services includes Service charges in relation to usage of money. Also, explanation which is attached to the definition of service. Section 2, clause 102 clearly tell that for arranging or facilitating transaction in securities, any service charges, if they are there, on that you are required to pay GST. So that is supply of services, and on that you are required to pay GST. There will be levy of GST. My friends, you have understood what is neither goods nor services. If you look at both these examples now on your screen, you will understand that whenever we were talking about this money, the moment we were talking about this money and securities, both money and securities, right, they are neither goods nor services. Neither goods nor services, there is no levy. But when you talk about service charges, the service charges in relation to usage of money or in relation to usage of securities, in relation to money or in relation to securities, it is supply of services, and there will be GST levied on the service charges portion. GST will be levied only on that 200 rupees. So I believe, my friends, now you have much clarity on the exclusion part of goods and services, which tells that it does not include money and securities. Plus you have more clarity on the inclusion part of services, which tells that services includes what services includes? Services specifically includes service charges in relation to money and service charges in relation to securities, right? So means part was very clear right from the beginning. Goods was movable property, service was anything other than goods. Over. Exclusion is now very clear with this example. Both goods and services does not include money and securities. Inclusion part of services is very clear. Service includes service charges in relation to money excuse me, friends, and it includes service charges in relation to securities. And when you talk about inclusion part now of goods, there we have to discuss something. Goods includes actionable claim. Goods includes actionable claim. So that part we have to discuss, right? Now before even discussing actionable claim, let us try to see the definition of money and securities which is very basic. I need not even go through, but just for the sake of understanding, we'll go through the definition of even money and securities. Understand that we are seeing a lot of definitions, right? In the beginning itself I said that we are not going to stick at the definition of only goods and services, though they are the most important definition in this chapter. You're seeing a lot of other definitions as well. So when you talk about meaning of money, which is defined under section 2 clause 75, it is a very simple thing. Money means Indian legal tender, which means that Indian currency, also foreign currency. In our example we have taken care of that. So when you went to a money changer and you said that I want dollars in exchange of rupees, that is also transaction in money only. So that 6,800 element was never taxed because it is mere transaction money. Only that 200 rupees, which is the service charges technically called as spread, only that was taken as supply of services, and GST would be on only that 200 rupees. So it is Indian legal tender or foreign currency, or check, promissory note, bill of exchange, letter of credit, draft, pay order, traveler check, money order, postal, electronic remittance, etc., etc. We are talking about all types of negotiable instruments. All types of negotiable instruments, or any such instrument, where similar instrument which is recognized by RBI when used as consideration to settle the obligation. The classic example here, you can take the example of say Paytm or BhimPay. So any example you can take, right? So any such similar instrument which is recognized by RBI when used as consideration to settle the obligation or exchange with Indian legal tender of another denomination, which means that recognized a way of settling the obligation, right? So if you talk about the definition of money, there's nothing special. Rather, only one thing special which you guys have to remember is money also includes foreign currency, and that too most of us are very clear that yes, obviously money includes even foreign currency. But wait, there's a tricky part here. Money shall not include. Money means, you have seen, money shall not include any currency that is held for the purpose of its numismatic value. So if you are holding the currency for the purpose of its numismatic value, then it is not called as money. Now, how to understand this particular point? Supposing I am giving you services, right? I am providing you services, and against that services, one of the student tells that I am going to pay you a old currency, old 1 rupee coin, which is having high worth, right? So now when I am taking that 1 rupee, that is not the 1 rupee which is recognized now. I am taking that 1 rupee as a matter of coin collection. I am interested in its currency collection. I am interested in its worth. So when you talk about this 1 rupee, is it money? If at all you call it as money, what is the problem? The problem is assessable value will be rupee 1. And when you talk about GST will be equal to rupee 1 multiplied by the percentage, which will be negligible. Right? My services are actually say worth 10,000 rupees plus GST, right, normally. But now I have taken only 1 rupee. And if I call it as money, the problem lies here. What is the problem? If I call it as money, then assessable value is rupee 1. And GST will be 1 rupee multiplied by the percentage of GST. So whatever percentage, 5%, 18%, whatever percentage you have to take and multiply that will be a problem for the government. Now, understand this. Strictly, I did not take that 1 rupee understanding it to be 1 rupee. I knew that 1 rupee has got a worth which may be more than 10,000 rupees. Correct? I am not specific with the value. It may be worth only 5,000 rupees also, but let us forget about that. But I am very clear that I am having that 1 rupee coin from you, not for the purpose of that transaction worth, but I know that it is having some worth in terms of its numismatic value, which means that I am interested in currency collection. Therefore, they correctly tell that now you cannot treat this 1 rupee as money. It cannot be called as money. If it is not money, then the consideration that I am getting is non-monetary consideration. Obviously, there is consideration. Don't jump to conclusion that there is no consideration. There is consideration. There is quid pro quo for sure. There is consideration. So obviously there is consideration, but now the consideration is non-monetary. See, when you gave that 1 rupee, I knew that it is worth something. So that is consideration for sure. Now, when it is non-monetary consideration, you have valuation rules where assessable value will be determined, and roughly assessable value will come back to 10,000 rupees. Roughly. Because that's a concept called as open market value. What was my open market value when I was giving the same services to other students? It was 10,000 rupees. So assessable value in this case, where a student is not giving me 10,000 rupees but only old 1 rupee coin, will also come to the same 10,000 rupees, and GST on the same would be again 10,000 multiplied by the percentage, which is the correct way. Got that? So why they exclude something from money? They are trying to tell that this 1 rupee, this particular 1 rupee that is received, right, this cannot be actually called as money, though it is technically, though in terms of measuring it, you can always tell that no, this 1 rupee is nothing but money, but technically they tell that no, if you are having currency that is held for the purpose of its numismatic value, that is currency collection, then it cannot be called as money. Rather, always I tell there are only 2 important points in the definition of money that you have to remember. Other points are all normal, you will always remember that. What are the 2 important points? Point number 1, money will also include foreign currency. Point number 2, money will also have any other similar instrument which is recognized by RBI. That is with respect to means part. Now there is another point with respect to exclusion part. Money shall not include what? Any currency that is held for the purpose of its numismatic value. If I am taking something from you in exchange of the goods or services, and that money that you are giving is not the real money, and it is I am holding that money only for the purpose of my currency collection or only for the purpose of its numismatic value, then it cannot be called as money. It becomes consideration which is not monetary. Non-monetary consideration will be there, and you will be shifted to valuation rules where it will take its own course of action. Right, that is all about your money. Now what is securities? I believe that money is very clear. 3 important points also we have discussed. 2 plus 1. Why 2 plus 1 means you have 2 important points, and shall not include has got 1 important point. Now securities is defined in section 2 clause 101 obviously of CGST Act 2017. So section 2 clause 101 of CGST Act. Now, securities is having a very normal definition that all of us clearly know. Securities include shares, scrips, bonds, stocks, debentures, debenture stock, or any other marketable securities of like nature, right? Securities also includes derivatives, security receipts, government securities. It also includes units or instrument under mutual funds or any collective investment scheme. We have taken the example of mutual fund to understand the example in relation to securities, mere transaction securities, and service charges associated with securities. So we have taken that example of mutual fund. Securities also includes instruments or certificates which are issued by special purpose distinct entity. Right, in your auditing, you will be discussing about special purpose distinct entity. So it also includes any instruments or certificates which are issued by a special purpose distinct entity which is formed. Say, for example, you are investing in National Highway Authority of India bonds. So you get a certificate, right? So that also is covered by the definition of security. Now, point number 5. Any other instrument as may be declared by central government as security. See, first 4 points are very specific. What are the first 4 points? Point number 1 was shares, scrips, stocks, etc. etc. Point number 2 was derivatives, security receipts, and government securities. Point number 3 was in relation to mutual funds. Point number 4 was in relation to a certificate or an instrument given by special purpose distinct entity. Now, point number 5 is very generic in nature. It tells that any other instrument as may be declared by central government as security. There may be any other item which is declared by central government as security, that will be calling it as security. So it is a generic nature. And last point, point number 6, rights or interest in security. So even right shares that you get, even that is part of securities, right? But in relation to this securities, I hope the securities definition, that was nothing new. It is actually taken from your Securities Contract Regulation Act. Section 2, clause 101 of CGST Act give reference to Securities Contract Regulation Act, section 2H of Securities Contract Regulation Act 1965, and from there we have this definition of securities which we will be discussing even in other subjects. Same definition is there, because everywhere wherever security is defined, they give connection to section 2 clause H of Securities Contract Regulation Act 1965. But that's one important point in relation to securities, right? That's a circular for that. Understand, my friends, circulars, we are going to discuss n number of circulars. Now, one way of discussing circulars is circulars will almost occupy 125 or 150 pages, right? One way of looking at that is, oh, you have 125 plus pages circulars. That is one way of looking. The second way of looking is 125 pages of circulars, which means that we need not even go through those circulars. Why? Circulars are issued by CBIC, right? Circulars are always issued by CBIC and they are always clarificatory in nature. They are always clarificatory in nature. So when you talk about circulars, they are issued by an authority called as board. Now, circulars do not form part of law. Friends, if you recall, in the first chapter we discussed something called as tax hierarchy, and there I specifically said that though this is not your given in your ICA module, I am interested in taking that because that makes the understanding of law very clear. If you recollect, law was combination of 3 C's: code, case laws, and customs. When you talk about code is equal to Constitution of India plus Act plus rules plus regulations plus notifications. Understand that regulations and notifications can be given by CBIC. So CBIC is also going to give regulations and notifications. When they are giving regulations and notification with the power of which is coming from Act or rules, that is part and parcel of law. But when CBIC are giving circulars, issuing circulars, they don't form part of law. Even in the discussion that we had, we never discussed circulars, right? Circulars are only for the purpose, clarificatory nature, for the purpose of uniformity, to ensure that if there is any doubt, and for the purpose of uniformity, CBIC will be issuing circulars. Say they are not part and parcel of law, which means that it is not binding on you. If it was part and parcel of law, it was binding on you. Now it is not part and parcel of law. It means that it is not binding of you. If you are not in satisfaction with the interpretation taken by the circular, you can challenge it. Now, my friends, if I tell that I don't like a provision of law, I don't like one of the provision of, say, GST Act, Can I tell that I am not going to comply with it? I cannot. Being a citizen of India, where the laws of India are applicable on me, I cannot tell that I am not going to follow it. I don't like it, I am not going to follow it. Right? I have to follow whether or not I like it, because it is part and parcel of law. But circulars are not that. Circulars are only clarifications for the purpose of uniformity given by CBIC, Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs. They are not part and parcel of law, which means that when they are not part and parcel of law, it is not binding on the assessee, which means that assessee may take it if he likes or he may ignore it. Right? So that is an important aspect of circulars that you guys have to remember. So whenever I discuss about circulars, I tell my students very clearly, see, circulars, you don't be afraid. If you have understood clearly what is law, circulars will be only adding some clarification. Rather, though the circulars looks very small, it has got something more to add. There will be lengthy circulars running to 2-3 pages, and we'll be completing them in 2-3 minutes. Right? Because when we have understood law in a very clear way, circulars have got nothing to add to it. They don't have technically anything to add on to it. They cannot add any further value to it. They are only going to clarify certain things because few of them had certain doubts, and CBIC thought it wise enough to issue circulars. And not all circulars are good in law. There are many circulars that we are going to discuss where there are certain problems. I may not touch upon all those problems, which is not relevant for your exam, but I will touch upon one or two to make you understand how to read the law. Now, an issue came up, and that was dealing with securities. So the moment we have discussed securities, we are coming to the circular. Right? An issue came up whether priority sector lending certificates, which is very common in banking sector, whether that attracts GST. What is priority sector lending certificates? Priority sector lending certificate is nothing but every bank is required to give certain percentage of loans and advances to priority sector depending on which category they belong. And if they fall short of it, they can take priority securities lending certificates from that bank which has given loans and advances to priority sector in excess of what was the requirement. Say for example, there are two banks. One bank is giving excess loans and advances to priority sector than what was required. So that excess portion, that bank will convert to priority sector lending certificate. And there is another bank which gave loans and advances to priority sector, which includes even agriculture, to priority sector lesser than what was required. The second bank gave loans and advances to priority sector lesser than what was actually required. Now what has happened? So it has fallen short of the requirement. Obviously RBI is going to take the bank for task. Now RBI allows the first bank who has given excess loans and advances in excess of the requirement to priority sector, that excess portion can be converted to priority sector lending certificates and handed over to the other bank which has given loans and advances to priority sector lesser than what was required. So you can convert that excess portion of loans and advances given to priority sector into priority sector lending certificates, and that bank which has given excess loan to priority sector can, after conversion into priority sector lending certificates with the permission of RBI, with following the rules and regulations of RBI, it can give to the other bank which is falling short of the requirement. That is the entire concept of priority sector lending certificate. Now friends, why are we investing time in understanding this? See, technically we don't require what is priority sector lending certificate, etc., but you have to understand what it is to understand what is the issue. Now the core issue which was there before CBIC when they were drafting this circular was whether this priority sector lending certificate is goods. Now for priority sector lending certificates to be goods, if at all it should be goods, it should be made sure that it is not securities. If at all you call it as securities, then go reverse. It cannot be called as goods. Therefore, the end result is there won't be any GST. Got that? Here come in the sequence. If at all you want to call priority sector lending certificate of goods, you should ensure that it is not securities. And if at all you prove that priority sector lending certificate is securities, then it is not goods. And if it is not goods, there is no GST. And if you prove that priority sector lending certificate is not securities, then it is goods, there will be GST. Now the core issue was whether priority sector lending certificate comes under the ambit of securities. That was the core issue. If it is securities, it is not goods, because both goods and services exclude securities, therefore no GST. If it is not securities, it is perfectly goods. Why? It is movable. If it is not securities, it is very clear that it is movable, it is goods, and you are going to pay GST on the same. Now the core issue was whether priority sector lending certificate is security. Let us go to that definition of securities again. If you see the first part of the definition of securities, shares, scrips, bonds, debentures, etc., there priority sector lending certificate is not covered. Point number 2, derivatives, security receipts, government securities, even there it is not covered. Third point, you are talking about units or instruments of mutual funds. No, even there it is not covered. Point number 4, instruments or certificate issued by special purpose distinct entity. Instruments or certificate issued by special purpose distinct entity. Are they certificates? Yes, but whether they are given by special purpose distinct entity? No. Therefore, they are also not covered by the fourth point. We are talking about obviously certificate, but it is not given by special purpose distinct entity. It is given by one bank to another bank. Therefore, it is not even covered that. Point number 5. Are they declared by central government as security? Answer is no. Answer is again no. Right. Just because it is there something on a piece of paper does not mean that it is securities. It is a myth, or people have misconception that okay, if anything is transferable and it is there in a document, piece of paper, then they assume that it is securities. No. You have to see the definition of securities. And by the way, my friends, this bifurcation which I have given, whether it is in money or whether it is in securities, is not given in law. If you want to see your law, there will be no bifurcation into point number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It will be a single line. We have to strongly believe in one particular point. Whenever you are reading a law, and more importantly, whenever you are reading the bare act of any law, you have to break it. Only if you break it, you will be in a better position to understand. If I were to tell that securities include shares, scrips, bonds, debenture, stock, marketable securities, derivatives, security receipts, government securities, or any instrument of mutual funds or collective investment scheme, or instruments of certificate issued by special purpose distinct entity, or you are talking about any other instrument which is declared by central government as security, etc. It doesn't really make sense, friends. Correct? You are not here to show your by-hearting skills. No. So you have to be very clear. You have to divide it one by one divide it. Once you do that practice, and I am going to help you in that breakup. So you are not going to invest any time in breakup. So already breakup is given, but you have to read that breakup very, very clearly. So we have seen that this priority sector lending certificate is not covered by any of these categories of securities that we have divided for the purpose of convenience. Now the same is true with MEIS script, which we are going to discuss in foreign trade policy. MEIS script, merchandise export from India scheme, priority sector lending certificate, renewable energy certificate, etc. There are a lot of examples. So whether it is MEIS script, or whether it is priority sector lending certificates, or whether it is renewable energy certificates, etc., they are not covered within the definition of securities. And once it is clear that they are not securities, it is again clear that they are goods. The moment I tell that they are not securities, it means that they are goods. And if I tell that they are goods, it means that GST will be there on that particular transaction. Whether it is dealing with MEIS script, or whether it is dealing with priority sector lending certificate, or whether it is dealing with renewable energy certificate, or whether it is dealing with any such certificate which is not covered by the definition of securities, then it is technically not securities. If it is technically not securities, it is covered by goods because it is movable. Correct? So you have to understand that. If at all you are in a position to prove that a certificate, so and so certificate, is security within the definition of security, then securities is neither goods nor services. Forget about GST. So that was the point clarified by the circular. And rather I said that this is one of the first circular that we have seen, where the height or the length is very short, but it has got huge understanding in terms of linking. If it is security, it is not goods, not services, no GST. Now that we have proved that priority sector lending certificate is not security, it is goods because it is movable. Therefore, you have GST. All the other lengthier circulars and all will be completing just like that. I will not be even telling that, okay, I will not be even opening the page of circular. I will just open the page of circular, I will explain the concept and circulars will be over just like that. Need not remember the circular number. As they are not part and parcel of law, there is no need to remember the circular number 34/08/2018. That is 34th circular in total and 8th circular of the year 2018. You need not remember that. Just remember it is CBIC circular. Now, one last thing which is left out in the product is the definition of actionable claim. Actionable claim. So, when you talk about actionable claim, that is defined in section 2(1), the first definition under the CGST Act. Right, section 2 clause 1 of CGST Act, which talks about actionable claim, and that in turn gives reference to section 3 of Transfer of Property Act. So rather, it does not define itself. It tells that please go and refer section 3 of Transfer of Property Act 1882. Now, what is actionable claim? Actionable claim means any claim to a debt which is any claim to a debt other than debt which is secured by mortgage of immovable property or pledge or hypothecation of movable property. So it starts in that language. It has to be again divided into two parts. Again, you have to remember this concept. Though in our childhood we have learned that united we stand, divided we fall. When you are reading the law, make it ulta. If you read it unitedly, you will fall. You have to break it up, and only then you can understand what they are trying to tell. Again, we have broken the definition into two parts. First part, actionable claim means a claim to a debt other than a debt which is secured by mortgage of immovable property or pledge or hypothecation of movable property. To put in simple terms, you are talking about a claim to unsecured debts. A claim to unsecured debts. You are talking about a claim to unsecured debts. The classic example for claim to unsecured debts is nothing but your sundry debtors or insurance claim, etc., etc. Insurance claim is a classic example, right? So when you have taken insurance of your factory, say tomorrow after clearing your chartered accountancy exam, do you decide that you will go for your dreams and you want to become a big businessman. You have your big factory and you have taken insurance, right? Unfortunately, there is a fire which has broken out in your factory. Obviously, you would have taken insurance, therefore you are going to go to insurance company. Insurance company is going to repay that amount, whatever they are going to do, survey and find what is the extent of damage or loss, and then they are going to repay some amount. Whether that repayment of amount by insurance company is liable to GST. Is liable to GST. Understand that. Is it actionable claim? Yes. Again, go back to the definition of goods. Whether goods includes actionable claim? Yes. So as of now, you'll understand that even actionable claims are covered by goods. But wait, we are not jumping to the conclusion. I have not answered whether GST will be there or not. We'll be taking that in an example. I have not even answered. So understand that it is an actionable claim. When you are talking about actionable claim, it is goods. And prima facie, if it is goods, GST should be the prima facie. But we are not jumping to that answer. As of now, we'll understand actionable claim. Then finally, we'll take an example to conclude the answer. Right. So you have to understand that the first part of actionable claim is quite simple. What is that? Any debt which is not secured by pledge or hypothecation of movable property or mortgage of immovable property. Classic example are your sundry debtors. You have sold a lot to a particular party and that amount in that sundry debtors, that particular party is showing to be say 10 crores, and you are not in a position to recover, and you go to a recovery agent and try to recover that amount. Again, that is an actionable claim because that debt is not secured. Actionable claim, right? Now you have to understand that once we see the second part, that's a common point where you'll have clarity. The second part talks about a claim. Whenever you're reading the second part, forget the first part. Any claim, actionable claims means any claim to beneficial interest in movable property. To beneficial interest in movable property which is not in the possession either actual or constructive of the claimant, which means that you don't have that property whether actually or constructively with you. Right, which is not in my possession. If at all I have it in my possession, I may not even file a case. Now, why we are talking about filing a case, you will understand finally. Now, the common point. Now, these two are the common points that you have to understand, which the civil court recognizes as affording grounds for relief. Which means that The second part, rather before we move to the civil code part, we'll complete the second part, then we'll take the common area. Second part is any claim to beneficial interest in movable property. The classic example for that is you're talking about your lottery, betting, gambling, etc. etc. That is a classic example. You're talking about beneficial interest in movable property where you're talking about lottery, betting, gambling, etc. etc. Say for example, I purchase a lottery and fortunately for me, unfortunately for the lottery company, I win the lottery. Now when I win the lottery, I will claim that amount from the lottery company, right, which are run under the control of state government. Now when I'm going to take that, I don't have any security on that. Tomorrow they may deny me the amount, telling that no, it is not this is not the actual winner, this number is not the actual one, so and so. Again, when you're talking about the second part, I am having the beneficial interest in movable property. I am the owner of that money because I have a lottery ticket in my hand telling that I should be getting that amount which is the winning prize. Correct. So I have beneficial interest in that movable property, beneficial interest in that piece of paper. So classic example here is betting, gambling, lottery, etc. Right. So you can always remember that example of lottery. So whenever you try to understand actionable claim, divide into two parts. A claim to unsecured debts, you can have a classic example of your debtors or insurance claim. Second part, a claim to beneficial interest in movable property, you can have a classic example of betting, gambling, lottery. Right. Now, common point. There are certain common points that you have to remember, which the civil court recognizes as affording grounds for relief, which means that if at all I don't get the amount from the debtor, or I don't get the amount from the insurance company, or I don't get the amount from the lottery company, I can go to a civil court. I can tell that please, I have won in this lottery, or I have to get this insurance claim because I am paying insurance premium regularly, or I have sold the goods to this particular person who happens to be my sundry debtors. Now I have to recover the amount from him. So which the civil court recognizes as affording ground of relief, whether or not that debt is beneficial, whether or not that debt or beneficial interest is existent or accruing or conditional or contingent. That actionable claim may be either existing, or either it is accruing, or either it is conditional, or either it is contingent. That is not at all relevant. That is what they are trying to tell. So friends, if I want to tell actionable claim in a very simple way, I can tell in this way. It is a claim against which you can take an action in civil court. I'll repeat that sentence. It is a claim against which you can take an action in civil court, which means that if your debtor is not paying you, you can take him to civil court. Which means that if the insurance company is not paying you, you can take the insurance company to civil court. Which means that if the lottery company is not paying you, you can take the lottery company to the court. So a claim against which you can take an action, file a civil suit against that particular company. So that is what is the definition of actionable claim. Now my friends, we have understood even actionable claims, but that's one tricky point, right? When you talk about all these actionable claims, why have we discussed actionable claims, by the way? Because goods includes actionable claim. Goods includes actionable claim, right? Goods is equal to movable property minus money or securities plus actionable claim plus growing crops and grass. So we are focusing that actionable claim. So it is covered within the definition of goods. If at all you want to understand, money and securities is neither goods nor services, whereas actionable claim is goods. Now to make it very clear, we'll take a last example with respect to actionable claim to make you understand the concept of actionable claim. Now we are talking about transaction in actionable claim. Supposing you have sold a party goods worth 2 crore rupees and that party is not paying you, which means that you are talking about your debtor who owes you 2 crores but he is not paying you, and you go to a recovery agent, right? Recovery agent is a very polished term for goons or gundas, right? So you go to a recovery agent. At times we have to use polished terms, isn't it? So recovery agent is nothing but a polished word which is used for goons or gundas which are having hand power so that they can recover the amount, right? Now coming back to the example, I have a debtor who owes me 2 crore rupees. I am trying for the last 3 years to recover that amount, and I see that amount is not coming. So what I do? I go to a recovery agent and I tell recovery agent, please recover this 2 crores from this party and I give him all the documentation. See, this is what I have sold him, these dates, what this was the value, etc., etc. I give all the documents, so he's going and recovering the amount on my behalf. And for recovering that amount of 2 crores, he is charging 10 lakhs. Now let us bifurcate this into 2. You are talking about 2 crores is nothing but actionable claim, sundry debtors. 2 crores is nothing but actionable claim, which is nothing but goods, which means that technically GST should be there, isn't it? That is what we have discussed. Technically, if at all you are talking about any actionable claim that is sundry debtors, GST should have been there. Why? It is goods. But still, you won't have any GST. Still, you won't have any GST. The reason is, when we are going to discuss supply, section 7, there will be a schedule called as section 7 read along with schedule 3. Now, that section 7 read along with schedule 3 tells that section 7 talks about supply. Schedule 3 tells that few supplies are neither supply of goods nor supply of services. They are neither supply of goods nor they are supply of services. So, few transactions are neither supply of goods nor supply of services. Out of them, one of the transaction that is mentioned is actionable claim. So, actionable claim is also mentioned again in schedule 3. So, when you see that actionable claim, what they have said it there? They tell that actionable claim other than betting, gambling, lottery. So, if it is betting or gambling or lottery, then they tell that it is not covered in schedule 3, GST will be there. But if at all it is anything other than betting, gambling, lottery, actionable claim other than betting, gambling, lottery, they tell that it is neither supply of goods nor supply of services, there won't be any GST. So, there is a schedule called as schedule 3, which tells that there are few activities which cannot be called as either supply of goods or supply of services. And one of the line item there is actionable claim other than betting, gambling, lottery. So, you have to understand that negative of negative. What is the intention that they are trying to tell? Betting, gambling, lottery is not covered in schedule 3, you charge GST on it. Other than betting, gambling, lottery, it is covered by schedule 3. Other than betting, gambling, lottery, it is covered by schedule 3. So, when you talk about other than betting, gambling, lottery, that is covered by schedule 3, therefore there won't be GST. And if it is betting, gambling, lottery, they tell that no, we are not covering that in schedule 3. That is not covered in schedule 3. So, you have GST on the same. Any actionable claim other than betting, gambling, lottery, no GST. In spite of the fact that it is goods. In spite of the fact that it is goods, there is no GST. So, when you come back to this example and see this example, so I have a debtor who owes me 2 crore rupees. I go to a recovery agent and tell that please recover that amount, and he tells me that okay, I'll recover that amount, but I'm going to charge 10 lakhs for the same. Now, forget about recovery agents charges 10 lakhs. Let us focus on my recovery of 2 crores debtors. That 2 crores recovery of sundry debtors is nothing but actionable claim, and that actionable claim is nothing but goods. In spite of that, there won't be any GST because of what? Because of schedule 3. Schedule 3 tells that actionable claim other than betting, gambling, lottery, no GST. Which means that if it is betting, gambling, lottery, there will be GST. But any other actionable claim other than betting, gambling, lottery, there is no GST. And this being a case of sundry debtors, which is neither betting nor gambling nor lottery, there is no GST. Now, let us complete this example. This was my recovery of 2 crores, which is actionable claim, which we have discussed. It is technically goods. Don't deny the fact that it is not goods. So, don't jump to conclusions. Answer is it is goods, but there is no GST. Why there is no GST? Because of schedule 3. So, answer was it is goods, but there is no GST because of schedule 3. Now, let us take the other part and complete it. That recovery agent has charged 10 lakhs from me. That is nothing but his service charges, isn't it? That is nothing but his service. See, service charges don't focus on the name. What name is used for service charges is immaterial. That is nothing but service charges, which is supply of services. And on that service charges, there will be GST. So, GST is there on the service charges which is being charged by the recovery agent. So, when recovery agent is going to charge 10 lakhs from me, he is going to charge 10 lakhs plus GST from me because that is his service charges. So that is all about actionable claim. Now once you look at the definition of goods and services, again you will find that everything now is quite clear, and by this we are done with the first P of this charging section. In this chapter we are going to discuss 3 P's: product, goods and services, that we have completed; process, supply, that we are yet to see; and place, interstate or intrastate, that we have to see. We have done thoroughly with the first P, which is product, goods or services. All the aspects we have seen it thoroughly.